Good evening. Today is Monday, November 24th, 2025. Hope everybody's having a good day as we enter the week of Thanksgiving. It's been 30 years since 1995. By the way, that was the year that the internet entered public consciousness as America Online and Prodigy offered access to the World Wide Web system, releasing may browsers that made it easily accessible to the general public. Um, I've often been a step behind in things, and when I was working on my PhD at Baylor, I used every term paper I wrote. I used a typewriter. It wasn't until 1994 when I began work on my dissertation that I took some computer classes and learned to do things that way. It'd be hard to go back to a typewriter today. But here are some of the important events of 1995. On January 31st, U.S. President Bill Clinton invoked emergency powers to extend a $20 million loan to help Mexico avert financial collapse. On February 13th, the United Nations Tribunal on Human Rights Violations in the Balkans charged 21 Bosnian Serb commanders with genocide and crimes against humanity. On March 16th, Mississippi ratified the 13th Amendment, becoming the last state to approve the abolition of slavery. Can you imagine that? 130 years after it had become part of the Constitution. Now, for an amendment to be ratified, three-fourths of the states have to ratify it. And when three-fourths ratify it, the one-fourth that don't ratify it are still bound by it. But it wasn't until 1995 that Mississippi put it on record that slavery was no more. But the proper paperwork was not submitted to the National Archives. And so the ratification would not become official until February 7, 2013. On March 20th, the Japanese religious sect Aum Shinrikyo released sarin gas on 5 subway trains in Tokyo, killing 13 and injuring 5,510. On March the 31st, Tejano pop singer Selena was shot at a Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi, Texas, and by our former employee, Yolanda Saldivar. 30 years later, Yolanda Saldivar remains incarcerated at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and prospects for release are not very good. She's been denied parole, and I understand she's held in isolation because there's a lot of Selena fans that would like to do something to her. On April 19th, 168 people were killed and 680 were wounded at the Alfred B. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City by a bomb set off by Timothy McVeigh. On May 14th, the Dalai Lama proclaimed 6-year-old Gedon Choki Nyima as the 11th reincarnation of the Panchen Lama. On May 21st, Pope John Paul II canonized John Sarkander during his visit to Olomouc in the Czech Republic. On June 6th, the Constitutional Court of South Africa abolished the death penalty. My major professor at Baylor, who directed my dissertation, Dr. John Johnson, was from South Africa, and he and his wife went back in 1994 to serve as election judges to see history in the making. The end of apartheid and the election of Nelson Mandela as the first black prime minister of South Africa. Um, it wasn't until um, the following year, they made the decision regarding the death penalty. Dr. Johnson, like myself, was a lifelong opponent of capital punishment. We were both very pleased to see this develop. On July 11th, President Clinton announced the restoration of relations between the United States and Vietnam after the end of the Vietnam War. There was a lot of controversy over that, and many of us who grew up when Vietnam was a hot button issue have vivid memories. A friend of mine, the late Manuel Sesteta of Waco, a Vietnam veteran, commented about this, and he said, "Not until my generation is dead will Vietnam cease to be a big issue." On August 6th, hundreds in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Tokyo, and Washington, D.C. marked the 50th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb. On October 3rd, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty in double murder for the deaths of former wife Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman. On October 16th, the Million Man March, conceived by Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, was held in Washington, D.C. On November 4th, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated at a peace rally in Tel Aviv. On November 14th, a budget standoff between Democrats and Republicans in the Congress of the United States forced the federal government to temporarily close national parks and museums and run most government offices with a skeleton crew. That's one of many government shutdowns, which are never good. In 1995, I was living in my hometown of Waco and completing my PhD in world religions at Baylor, while teaching at Paul Quinn College, which in 1990 moved from Waco to Dallas. During the 1994-95 academic year, I was awarded a faculty improvement grant by the United Negro College Fund, which enabled me to take a sabbatical and work full-time on my doctoral dissertation. That was a real blessing. On December 31st, 1994, my wife Deborah and I attended the annual Regular Fellows New Year's Eve ball at the Waco Convention Center. That night, for the first time, I heard a record by blues singer Buddy Ace. Excuse me, it's a little late. I'm going to get through this. He had died exactly 1 week earlier during a Christmas Eve performance in Waco. Since then, I've written a number of articles about this great recording artist. On January the 1st, 1995, for the fourth year in a row, I celebrated the holy name of Jesus at St. Paul's Episcopal Church. And this year, the attendance was better than in previous years, no doubt due to the fact that this New Year's Day fell on a Sunday. I attended services at many churches that year, and I preached at Edwards Chapel AME Church in Waco, Dallas Howard AME Church in Waco, Clifton Cumberland Presbyterian Church in Waco, and Pleasant Hill Baptist Church in Whitney. On April 19th, I attended a memorial service at Mount Carmel near the community of Elk. This day marked the second anniversary of the fire that destroyed the Branch Davidian compound. On my way back to Waco, I heard on the radio about the Oklahoma City bombing. That day, I typed for my daughter Erica a paper on women in the Nation of Islam and for a class on women in American religion taught by Dr. Rosalie Beck, who was Baylor's first female religion professor. And it was under her I studied Baptist history in 1991. That afternoon, I met with my dissertation committee, successfully completed this final stage of the doctoral program. The meeting was held in the Summers Seminar Room, named for Dr. Ray Summers, who lived from 1910 to 1992. It was under Dr. Summers that I studied the book of Revelation in 1973, and I've made extensive use of his commentary, Worthy is the Lamb, throughout the years. On May 13th, I received my PhD from Baylor. This event was doubly special because Erica received her BA degree in the same ceremony. So that was quite exciting for our family. On September 23rd, I officiated at Erica's wedding to Kenneth Brox. For a long time, I had prayed that my mother, Clyde Uzzell Adams, would live to see me get my PhD. She was still living, but was in a nursing home suffering from Alzheimer's disease, which is very horrific. On this day, following the ceremony, I visited her, showing her my diploma and trying to explain what it meant. I understand that Alzheimer's patients have lucid moments, and sincerely hope that this was one of hers. She went home to be with the Lord on December 10th of that year. And during the fall semester of 95, I returned to the faculty of Paul Queen College, but soon learned that this institution was not accustomed to faculty being on sabbatical. I was not scheduled to teach any classes, although I was being paid. I had trouble figuring out what my duties were, what was expected of me. It was not until the fall semester of 96 that I would again have a full schedule of classes. If May 13th was the high point of the day that Erica and I graduated, November 18th was the low point of the year. On the latter date, I drove from Waco to Greenville to the state planning meeting of the AME Church and did not receive a pastoral appointment. I was devastated. I had put the pastoral ministry on hold in order to earn my doctorate. I expected to be welcomed back with open arms, but instead was reprimanded for getting out of line. It's often said it's easier to get a job if you have a job than if you don't. Well, that applies in the church, because if you have a church, it's easier to get moved somewhere else than if you don't. And you don't have a bargaining chip. And some lessons are learned the hard way. Ouch! It would not be until November of 96 that I would again receive an appointment, this time to the Blooming Grove Maypole Circuit. And by the way, I mentioned earlier about the government's shutdown. It was only 5 days. It operated from May 14th to May 19th. But I remember a few days, it was right in the midst of that shutdown that I had that devastating meeting in Greenville, in which I felt rejected by the church that I felt like I had given so much to. And I felt like the church had turned its back on me. Well, I'd gone to Erica's job. She was at Skyline High School at the time in the Communities in School program. And one of her colleagues asked me in casual conversation if I think the government was going to be able to operate. I had to be honest, I hadn't really been thinking about it, because my focus was on, was I going to get a church, not on the government shutdown. Government shutdowns are bad. Qualified ministers not being able to get appointments is equally bad. But everything takes time. Throughout 1995, I wrote articles for a number of newspapers and magazines. Also tried repeatedly to find a publisher for my dissertation, and that was frustrating. It wouldn't be until 2006, after 11 years of rejection letters, Cornerstone Publishing Company, then located in New Orleans, published Eliphas Levi and the Kabbalah, the Masonic and French connection of the American mystery tradition. The events of 1995 and subsequent years have confirmed my belief that time, patience, and perseverance accomplishes all things. Wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and God bless.